Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Future is in Evidence dialogue series. These talks with key experts will explore how technology, digitization, and innovation are charting new territory for the monitoring, evaluation, and learning practice. Follow us on Twitter at GI_GlobalEval, and we're also on LinkedIn at Global Evaluation Initiative. And visit our webpage. Tell us what you think and enjoy the video.
Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever in the globe you're joining us from today. We bring to you another exciting episode of the GI Launchpad video series. I'm Valentine Gandhi from the GI Launchpad, and joining us today is Michael Cooper, who is the Director of Monitoring, Evaluation, Research, Learning, and Adaptation at the Panagora Group. Mike and I have collaborated in the past in several initiatives, so I'm very happy to be speaking with you again and look forward to our conversation, Mike.
Always good to be here, Val.
Today's discussion, as you know, is on blockchain and monitoring, evaluation, and learning. And so blockchain as a technology has been receiving a lot of attention in the past few years. In fact, some of them have been quite hyped. But beyond the hype, it does have some value as a technology in several fields. As a M&E practitioner who also dabbles in technology, especially on blockchain, can you tell us if blockchain as a technology can be utilized in the MEL space to provide new ways of doing M&E and learning?
I think as blockchain technology it's a cross-purpose technology, right? And so I think that that's kind of what we're starting to see with the technology in general, right? The original applications were around, Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies, and now we're starting to see it being used for things like supply chain management and healthcare records management, other forms of data management. And so I think that, the short answer is yes. I mean, blockchain is going to have significant disruption in the field of MEL, right? Because, we're responsible for measuring things, and we're responsible for measuring the pathway to things. And so it just makes sense that as, these things change that we're measuring because of the use of blockchain technology, there's going to be implications for how we conduct our measurements and things like that. And so I usually break it into two when we're talking about MEL, I break it into two categories in terms of blockchain. I think that there's how MEL is going to have to adapt to be able to measure, policies, interventions, practices that use blockchain technology. And then I think that there's MEL practices that actually use blockchain technology to perform their work, right? And so in the first instance, MEL practitioners, MEL policy is going to have to shift from evaluating outcomes that didn't need a blockchain to be achieved, right? Or were achieved less efficiently without a blockchain. And so now we're going to have to be responsible for measuring the value add or the efficiencies introduced by the blockchain. But then also we're going to be using blockchain within our actual MEL work, right? Using blockchain technology as a data management tool, using blockchain technology to achieve certain levels of data transparency, data security, things like that, big data applications that use blockchain because of blockchain technology opens up new data sources. And so, a lot of these data science and big data methods that we're seeing emerge in the field are going to become more prevalent.
Thanks, Michael, for that insight on how blockchain for MEL and MEL for blockchain can be used. Digging a bit deeper on the blockchain for MEL space, could you walk us through how the characteristics of blockchain, specifically on the decentralization, immutability, and transparency factors, can actually contribute to improving the accountability within the MEL space?
I think you're I think accountability is the right word, right? Because I think that's kind of it's the buzzword around blockchain, and for good reason, right? Just because, uh, you know, a lot of the problems that blockchain is seeking to solve are around problems of accountability. And so I would say that, at the 20,000 foot level, when we talk about the value add of this tool within MEL, I would say is, break down your data life cycle for whatever MEL project you're working on, and you look at your data life cycle and you look for any areas where trusting the data is an issue, right, or data quality is an issue, and you can look for ways that blockchain can help to alleviate that issue and solve that problem. And so I think, at the collection standpoint, at the beginning of the life cycle, there's been mountains of evidence around, lack of trust in things like census data, where because of manipulation after collection, and that doesn't just extend to census data. It's all kinds of different public administration data, or lots of different data sets, right? There's concerns about data sets being manipulated at the point of collection and things like that. Well, if these data sets come from a blockchain, just because of the inherent design and attributes of the blockchain, those trust issues don't completely go away, but there's a higher probability that you can trust that data, that it's a reliable data source. And so I think that has major implications for MEL. But blockchain also gives people a lot more control over their personal data, right? And this is whether it's an individual, a company, any type of entity. Blockchain enables a lot more control over their data. And so what we're starting to see is things like data marketplaces, right? So for example, Ocean Protocol is kind of the first large data marketplace where entities, whether it be individuals or companies, whoever, can go and sell their data, whether it's to researchers, private companies, et cetera. And so I think that the use of data marketplaces for evaluation and research is going to become more prominent. And so I think that, and I actually think that that's a good thing, right? Because one thing that we're always wrestling with within MEL is responsible and ethical use of data, right? And so within these data marketplaces, entities have a lot more control over the data they share and things like that. And so there's going to, a lot of these ethical concerns are going to be somewhat alleviated. And so I think that in terms of accountability, trusting the data is going to be one of the biggest value adds of using blockchain within MEL and for MEL.
Thanks so much for that useful response with specific examples, Mike. Going forward, if I was, as you know, this is part of the GI Launchpad video series, and some of the teams that we are focusing on are startups, and these could be, if you are a startup in El Salvador or in Indonesia, for instance, they are still starting out in the MEL and tech space. So where would they need to go as a starting point if they start to test some technologies, especially blockchain in M&E in their work? Where would be a good starting point?
I think that we go back to kind of one of the first things we were talking about, right? Where we kind of divide our, blockchain and MEL into two categories, where you're evaluating or measuring something that's using a blockchain, or you're using a blockchain to help with the measuring. I actually think that the biggest piece is going to be measuring things that use a blockchain, an intervention that uses a blockchain, because then we're going to be responsible for measuring the value add of the blockchain as an innovation, as a novel concept over the alternative, right? So if we were doing a land titling program or a food voucher program where a blockchain wasn't used and now we're using a blockchain, it's going to be our job to say, well, this was the value add of the blockchain. This is what makes it more efficient and why, and this is lessons we should learn for scaling up. And so I think that in order to do that well as MEL practitioners, we need to get to know the problems that blockchain is supposed to be solving, right? And so I think that the more that we understand these problems, the better we're going to be able to speak to and come up with good measures for the value add of blockchain and solving these problems. And so I think that, for practitioners that are looking to get into the field and start to work with blockchain, I think that, you look at some of like early applications that are happening right now, right? Especially in the DeFi space, right? The decentralized finance space, right? So I think that there a lot of consensus is a good source and as a leader in the social impact decentralized finance space. I think in terms of, some of the other early applications, supply chain management, I would encourage people to go and look at, something like Fishcoin or something like that, where, communities have bootstrapped their own supply chains to solve natural resource problems where they use the blockchain, community currencies that are using blockchain right now. So I think if you looked at somebody like Grassroots Economics, and the reason why I, mention these is because it gets back to this idea of, again, we need to know the problems that blockchain is supposed to be solving. And if we know the problems and we know the technology, then we're going to be able to come up with better measures. And so I think that would be my first piece of advice.
Mike, as always, a pleasure to talk to you. Thank you for sharing those valuable insights. And for those of us watching us today, thank you for joining us, and look out for more of our video series from GEI Launchpad, and visit us on our website listed below. Thanks, and have a good evening, good night, or good morning.
Thank you.